All right. We've heard the budget speech earlier today on a Sunday. For a change, I'm not really sure why we've heard it, but we right now are going to do a quick expert review on what was announced. Now, Jayati Ghosh joins me right now. She is a very respected developmental economist. She's taught at JNU. She now teaches at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, USA, apart from other places where she teaches economy and economics. And particularly when she's always been very passionate about unemployment, um, the farm sector and the people who work in these in informal sectors as well. Jayati Ghosh, thank you so much for joining us. I'm particularly excited to have an opportunity to speak to you after this budget because when I was listening to it this morning, the words that were missing were farmers and unemployment and the poor apart from other big announcements. And we tend to expect in year three of any term, which is where we are, the government tends to use this opportunity for bigger, less popular reform. But there wasn't any of that. What is your review of this budget?
Well, to be fair, I had very low expectations from this budget. I didn't really expect them to deliver very much. And that's been more or less what has happened. But in some way, it has disappointed me even more than I expected. And that's more in the detail. It was not in the finance minister's speech, but it's in the numbers that show up. I personally have stopped paying much attention to the finance minister's speech because we find that most of the announcements that are made end up not really being implemented, or the budgetary allocations are so small that they don't matter, or they actually just never happen, or they fizzle out into thin air with tiny investments. So, we get all excited about different schemes and programs that they announce, but they don't actually take place and they have very little impact. And then the government conveniently forgets about them in a few years. Whether it's the Mudra scheme for small entrepreneurs, or it is, the apprenticeship scheme that was launched with such fanfare, all of these things, really, it doesn't matter anymore. But I think the budget and looking at it is still useful because, the numbers give us some idea about the actual approach, the unstated real approach to the economy.
Well, let's take it piece by piece. I was a little concerned that we didn't hear enough about unemployment because it remains a massive concern in our country. Youth unemployment, if I'm not mistaken, the last number we looked at was about 17%. Mm-hmm. Was there enough? There was something about skilling, but was that enough in your opinion?
Not at all. And we've been saying skilling for the last 20 years. And, we have extremely skilled youth who are not finding jobs. And we're going to have more and more skilled youth who are not finding jobs. So the problem is elsewhere. It is a macroeconomic problem. And that is something that this government has just refused to accept for a very long time, which is that we have to stop seeing our workforce as a potential cost. Everything is designed to drive down wages, to reduce labor costs, to make it easier for employers to pay less and less to workers. We should instead be seeing our workforce as an asset and a potential source of demand. Because, that's the reason why private investment is not picking up. Over the last 10 years, we've seen all kinds of blandishments. We had a major corporate tax cut in 2019. We've had all kinds of other incentives being thrown at the private corporate sector. Investment rates keep falling. They don't go up. And why don't they go up? Because there isn't demand in the country. There isn't a mass market that will buy the goods that they would actually go out and produce. And that's the same reason why foreign investment has also realized that this is not really a workable proposition. And we're not getting the FDI that they expected for sure, or even the portfolio investment, which has been leaving the country in droves over the last months.
Well, if we take this piece by piece again, last year there was a sort of tax cut for income tax in the country. The slabs were changed, and the idea was this will leave more money in the hands of people to spend. Domestic spending will go up among the average Indian, and that will be a fillip to companies to invest more. That hasn't happened, has it?
Again, who is the average Indian? 8% of the people pay income tax. 8%. So, you and I are in that rich category. But how much more can 8% do relative to increasing the incomes, the livelihoods of our 1 billion, say? And you could do that if you really focused on things like actually a genuine employment guarantee instead of destroying the one that already exists, bringing in one for urban areas, which there are many excellent proposals available, massively increasing spending on health and education, because really the poor people are going in debt for dealing with health crises and trying to put children through school and college in the hope that they will get jobs which they are not able to get. Also, because these are hugely employment generating. And also, something I've been saying for a very long time, small, micro, and medium enterprises is where it's at. Again, we had some tiny, rather ridiculous scheme for small enterprises in the budget. But actually, you need a full package to give them the same terms that the big guys get. They should be getting access to credit at the same terms. They should be getting access to knowledge. They should be having a package that provides inputs, enables them to access markets. It can be done. And if we focus on that, that's where employment will be generated. And that will filter down or filter up, shall I say. It will actually bubble up to the corporate sector as well.
I mean, the fact that there was no mention of farmers or farmer income, and I remember at one point this government was saying that they will double farmer income by a certain deadline. That deadline has sort of been sidestepped, and there's no mention of it. There was no mention of it at all. Also, the employment guarantee scheme, Manrega, which has now been renamed, and a lot of that cost has been pushed on to the states to bear that cost. But was there anything there in your mind that will support our agriculture sector in a way that will improve incomes?
Not at all. And in fact, it's worse. It wasn't just that the scheme is renamed, it has been destroyed. It was a right. It was a right you could demand work, and it was the duty of the state to provide it. It is now a centralized scheme where state governments have no say, panchayats have no say. The central government decides when, where, how much, and what will be done. It's entirely up to them. And for that, which the state governments have zero power over, or the local panchayats, they have to shell out 40% of the money, which they cannot afford. In fact, it's financially impossible for state governments to deliver this, which means it will not happen. So as usual, there's a big promise of 125 days of employment. There's no question of getting that. Even in the best days of Manrega, we got 40, 50 days on average of per household. But now there's zero question because state governments cannot afford to pay that 40%. In any case, a lot of it is going to be contracted driven and capital intensive because they've taken all of that out as well in the new law. And essentially, the government has put itself in this state where they're saying, look, we are willing to spend the money. It's the state government that's not doing it. So it's their fault. It's not our fault. It's shocking what has been done because this was a critical lifeline for the rural poor. And it was also a stabilizing force macroeconomically, and we won't have that, which is a disaster.
I mean, the other thing that disappointed me, Jayati Ghosh, was the missing urban development and air pollution. I mean, after Geeta Gopinath pointed it out at Davos that air pollution is now an economic issue for India, it's going to cost India in lives, it's going to cost India in medical care. We need to look at that before we look at anything else. There was no mention of it at all in this budget because there could have been a direction at least placed in Parliament saying this is something we're taking seriously. Is this wishful thinking or misplaced hope on my part to hope that this found a place in the budget?
Well, I mean, it would be the normal, rational thing to do, and it's what other countries have done. So, it's extraordinary to me that, okay, Geeta Gopinath said it, but you don't need someone outside to say it. You experience it in our cities. And it's not just Delhi anymore. Mumbai is polluted, Kolkata is polluted, Bangalore is polluted, smaller towns are polluted. And this has real economic effects, not just in terms of eventual illness and death. We have an unhealthy workforce right now. All the people I see, working people around me, are coughing. All of them have got some lung infection. All of them. I mean, literally everyone. Whether it's a driver, a person selling peanuts on the road, construction workers, domestic workers, everybody is ill because of this air pollution. And on top of that, You have this, this notion that somehow it doesn't affect anything else. Tourism has come down because people are worried about air pollution, and that's destroying other kinds of livelihoods. Foreign direct investment thinks twice for the same very reason. It is such a burning, immediate economic issue that it's just extraordinary that it's not a bigger political issue and right on the minds of our leaders all the time. I have to also mention, I was recently in Johannesburg and in Sao Paulo. Both cities had what they called high levels of air pollution, above 200, above 250 AQI. Both of them have brought it down to under 80. So it can be done. It's not just China that has got rid of its air pollution. Countries like South Africa and Brazil have managed to do it. So it clearly can be done. And so
Yeah.
it's just the lack of political will, which is inexplicable to me.
And it's interesting because if the solution is found in big cities like Delhi and Mumbai, that solution can then be applied to other cities that seem to be headed that way. Because if we don't do anything, in the next 2 or 3 years, our top 15, 20 cities will all have unbreathable toxic air. That's the direction that we're going in. I apologize for the barking dog.
I think he
uh,
agrees.
I do want to ask you about the tariffs, though. I mean, sorry, shh. We've had the Trump tariffs and the textile industry, several industries that are suffering because of it. Could there have been anything offered in this budget for that?
So you see, when I said that the budget disappointed me, despite my low hopes, there were three areas of disappointment. One, you've mentioned farmers, because farmers is a political issue for the government still. So I would have thought there would be at least some attempt to pacify them instead of thinking that PM Kisan 6,000 rupees a year, 500 rupees a month is enough. So that's one. The other, I mean, I have a long-standing concern about small-scale enterprises, but I know that that's not going to happen. But I genuinely felt that there would be a package for the labor-intensive industries that are hit by tariffs. And that's particularly gems and jewelry, textiles and clothing, footwear, leather and footwear. Now, they are relatively small. They are things you can have specific packages for. And the package can include credit, it can include technology upgradation, and helping them find other markets. Because the US market, it's right now not available, and we can't keep hoping for it to happen. But we should be ready to compete in other markets. And none of that was there, which to me was a big surprise. But the third very big surprise, I just want to raise, Faye, because it was hidden in the numbers, but it's very important, is the real destruction of federalism through the extreme stinginess, or I would say even oppression, shown to state governments. So let me explain exactly what I mean by this. We know that it's a centralizing government. We know they take decisions without consulting states, including, the corporate income tax reduction. They never consulted states that also lost 40% of the revenue from that, and so on. So we know that it's a centralizing government. But you know what they've done this year? Their own tax revenues were significantly below what they expected, okay? It was about 120,000 crore, I think 119 something, okay? But approximately 120,000 crore less than they expected. So what have they done? They have cut the grants in aid to state governments by 121,000 crore, and they have cut, that's the centrally sponsored schemes. They have cut by 121,000 crore, and they've cut the grants in aid by 163,000 crore. So they are making state governments bear the burden of all of these reductions, because these schemes are run by the state governments. They can't simply do away with them. If they don't deliver, their people will be asking them, why isn't this happening? Why isn't that happening? And the grants in aid are critical, sometimes for capital investment, sometimes if you have a natural disaster, for whatever reason. To cut those is not just deeply, I mean, selfish is the wrong word, it's deeply destructive also of any support that states can expect from the center. And I fear that it's destructive of our whole federal polity.
Professor Ghosh, what is your assessment right now of this budget, in the sense that, do you believe that it will have any impact at all on the ground? Will people feel any of this? Or did it, Was there anything in this budget that you were impressed by?
No, unfortunately not. There was nothing. But you see, it's also because I take all the promises made in the budget speech with a huge grain of salt. Because if you just look the following year or 2 years down the line, none of those schemes amount to anything. So unfortunately, as I said, I went in with low expectations. So I thought I couldn't be disappointed. But I've been disappointed in these three areas, and that's a bit serious.
The other thing that I thought, was missing at least was any mention of railways, which used to have its own budget separately at one point
Mm.
because it was that important in India. There was no mention of it at all, except for those seven, high-speed corridors that were announced. Uh, is that a miss? Should there have been something there about safety? Should there have been something there about, you know, local transport like the Mumbai local? Have we sort of abandoned railways as well?
Well, that's very interesting. I haven't looked specifically at the railways, but it fits in entirely with the rest of the approach to infrastructure. Because the one thing this government has spent a lot more on is what they call capex, yeah,
Yeah.
capital expenditure. And most of it is infrastructure. But it hasn't had the kind of impact you would expect because it's all mainly directed to these very large, big ticket projects, which have high publicity, major highways, high speed rail, fancy new airports, that kind of thing. Now, that doesn't generate jobs, but more importantly, it doesn't help most small micro medium enterprises. So if you did instead said we're going to make an all-weather road to every village, we're going to ensure piped water and electricity to every household, those would have an impact. Those would actually make a difference. That is the difference in terms of the approach to infrastructure, I think. And what you're saying
But
about the rail fits
yes.
exactly with it.
So, but I mean, when this government started, these are the things that they were talking about: the India Jal Mission, where they would be piped water to every single village. There'd be a road leading to every village. Every village would be electrified. Have those goals been met?
Well, you see, the audits that are supposed to be performed are not performed. The data that we have suggests that they are at best maybe 50, 60% and way behind target. And certainly the micro studies that are conducted by NGOs and others show that it's not the case in many, many villages. But on the other hand, you see, the trouble is that data are also being suppressed. So, the poor head of the survey that found that, the universal toilets had not been achieved, that there was still open defecation, according to the survey. The poor man lost his job. So this is how you can suppress the information that would show that it hasn't met what you had promised. It's a
But
bit
could
like
it
the Ganga scheme. That had an audit. It
yeah.
was available for 5 minutes online and disappeared.
Could it be that the argument behind this budget is that if we're growing at 7% odd, which is already impressive by itself, in spite of Trump's tariff, all of the uncertainty in the world, maybe we don't do anything and leave things as they are and just continue because that's the best option out of this?
Well, first of all, I don't believe the 7%, and I don't think anyone does. I mean, even the IMF has said that, it's a problematic calculation. But let's even say 5%. You tell me an economy that has been growing at 5% for 20 years, where real wages are stagnant, and where some real wages have fallen, and where incomes from self-employment have fallen. I can't think of any other economy like that. If we are getting growth, it's absolutely then the wrong kind of growth.
What, according to you, are the solutions for our economy right now?
I would say the most important is actually the revival of the small, micro, medium enterprises, a focus on public spending in health, education, sanitation, ensuring that our population is adequately fed and is able to live in reasonably clean surroundings, which includes the atmosphere. Those are our major priorities, and those are what is important for the economy as well.
Jayati Ghosh, if I were to ask, I know all guests hate this question, but if I were to ask you to give a star rating to this budget out of 5, where would you place it?
No stars.
0. Okay,
Yes.
0 out of 5.
Sorry. Sorry about that, but there it is.
All right, Jayati Ghosh, thank you so much for spending time with me and answering our questions. I look forward to chatting with you a lot more in the future. Thank you.
Great. Great. Thank you.